We're looking at another picture now from Skywatch. We saw another vehicle, might have been a police vehicle or someone trying to get out of the way of this group as it is moving. I believe that might be another look at this march going north on State Street. That's what we believe this group is doing. When you think about what these people are saying tonight, and you have to think about the scope, Jermont mentioned he had that shot of the entire crowd from start to finish when we saw those CPD officers. It was roughly 15 minutes. We're talking about thousands of people in the streets right now of the Loop in Chicago, making their voices heard, protesting actions taken by ICE and the federal government in Los Angeles and other areas. As far as we saw that bit of vandalism, we haven't heard any other reports of people being hurt. We have witnesses from our crews that have seen possibly a handful of people detained. So
let me just jump in here. Chris, did you say north of the river? Okay, so we're being told that this group is on Dearborn now, north of the river. So if that's the case, they've moved out of the Loop and are heading toward River North. Okay. Let's check back in with Sabrina Franza, because the last time we were able to check in with her, she was on Michigan, but I believe they were heading north as well. Sabrina, as I toss to you, I did want to ask you whether this is a preview of something we have not talked about yet over the last hour and a half or so, and that is the protest scheduled nationwide on Saturday called No Kings.
And Joe, we talked to the organizers of the No Kings protest here in Chicago, and they called Chicago an anchor city for that protest, which has been on the books since February. They've been planning this, and now given what's happened in Los Angeles and the overall mood of the country, especially in cities like Chicago, it is very possible that on a Saturday in the middle of a weekend where the weather is supposed to be clear, that this crowd is just a snapshot of what we might see in a few days from now. And as you mentioned, we are headed towards River North. The bridge is just behind me here. So this crowd has put on miles this afternoon, wrapping all the way around the Loop, at times for some folks multiple times over, and then turning around and making their way northbound on Michigan, now headed towards River North. So, and we talk about the No Kings rally on Saturday. That is one of, they said, around 1,800 demonstrations that have been planned across the country, from small towns to big cities like Chicago, Philly, other anchor cities that they mentioned to us today. And the goal was to protest against the actions of the federal government, to do so peacefully. But as we've seen here today, the route has been confusing. The organization has been hard to nail down. And we know the organizers for this rally have had a plan since February. So it'll be interesting to see how that materializes on the 14th, which is the same day as we know, the president's birthday, the military parade that is planned, that celebration that he has planned for that day. Now, this demonstration, like we mentioned, making its way across the bridge here, and by doing so, also blending into even more traffic that the folks here did not anticipate meeting a crowd of protesters here today. Chicago police lining now this side of the bridge to at least section off a portion of it from cars, from protesters. You can see they're not confronting anybody. They're just standing, blocking the street here, blocking the bridge. With the construction going on the State Street Bridge, this bridge is much more congested than normal, as it is on this one-way street headed northbound. As these protesters are now making their way across, some are now heading back towards the Loop, it seems, in this live look that you're seeing here, as others cross the bridge to make their way towards River North. So as we mentioned, it's not really clear where the end of this will be, but this crowd has continued on, and with the car that we saw earlier today driving through the crowd and people rushing to help to make sure that everyone was okay, this crowd continues. And some of the folks that we've seen at 4 o'clock, at 5:30 at Federal Plaza are still here. We recognize some of these signs here. work. So these people are the same. There's more and more of them. People have gotten off work. They're joining the crowd. And the chants continue. Joe, Marie.
Looks like, was this group that you're showing us here the one that looked like it might be turning back toward the loop and not crossing the bridge, but they're now crossing?
Yeah.
Okay, so
there are two. It seems like it's kind of split off.
Interesting to note as we follow both groups, what might turn into both groups.
Skywatch you're looking at on the right side of your screen is at Dearborn in Illinois. So as we mentioned, they are into River North now, or at least part of this group. But this group, as we pointed out, has grown considerably and is in the thousands, I think, is a safe estimate when you see, as Jermont pointed out, how far this group stretches from end to end, from start to finish. But it does seem as if at least parts of this group are starting to splinter and head in different directions. And it appears that some of the CPD officers you saw right here lined up are trying to force this group into one area or another at least, but they're in so many different parts of the city. That's going to be a tall order for sure. But you can see these officers are at Dearborn in the river. You can see the Corn Cob buildings behind there, Marina Towers. But at this point, to sort of echo what we've seen, short of some people who've tagged police cars, this has been a relatively cooperative and peaceful protest, short of the 2 arrests we've seen. And when you consider how many people are out there, I guess you could say certainly that is a low number. And again, Marie, as you said, the headline of the afternoon, which was the car that sped through this group of protesters near State and Monroe, giving everyone a scare as we watch that live on Skywatch.
I want to mention as well, we are referencing that driver as a woman because during our live coverage, we saw at one point the driver of that vehicle get out of the car. We were able to see her and get a bit of a good look at her. Then she was able to get back into the car and drive off. No word on what the status of that investigation is right now. But as Joe mentioned, that happened right at State and Monroe. That is where our Jermont Terry has been stationed for much of the last half hour. Jermont, what are you seeing at that location now?
Standing by, standing by. Yeah, I am currently, Marie, at State and Monroe still. Southbound lanes of State Street are still blocked between Monroe and Adams. We just wanted to show you, this is what, when those demonstrators came through, we showed you this before, but they obviously tagged many of the squad cars that were parked here. This is where CPD were essentially staging. As you know, you can see what we can show you. This one right here, say, Free GA, could be an indication of Gaza or whatever they were tagging. This has been an issue that put CPD, they were trying to prevent. But again, when you have close to 500 people or more walking down the street, they cannot always stop everyone. CPD doing the best they can to make sure that this crew maintains order. And these guys have been out here for the majority of the afternoon, making sure that people are safe. You have mentioned that one incident. I want to make sure our security team watched this vehicle that's gotten down the street here. Excuse me. But they want to make sure that people are in fact safe. You guys mentioned that one red vehicle that came close to hitting the demonstrators and the protesters. The purpose of why she did that, to be determined, but keep in mind when people were just trying to get home, I've seen a lot of people getting caught in the middle of this, whether they were in vehicles or not, just making sure that they were caught by surprise by the amount of people walking in the streets. Here it is what? 7:15 on a Tuesday. It is not normal for me to walk on State Street and traffic being blocked. But again, this is the problem that comes about when demonstrators take to the streets and no one really knows the true organizers. You heard Sabrina say earlier that she was trying throughout the day to get in contact with this group that started the demonstration at Federal Plaza, but there were so many groups that came together at Federal Plaza, it was unclear who was actually orchestrating and organizing this event. But as we continue to walk down State Street, I'm going to be careful because Chicago police, this is their staging area. They're still monitoring the situation. We have been aware that top brass CPD officers are out here monitoring this situation, and that is important. I have not seen Superintendent Larry Snelling out here, but we do know top CPD brass on the streets monitoring the situation as this group has traveled from Federal Plaza all the way, tried to get on DuSable Lakeshore Drive. I want to show you some video that we were able to shoot earlier in the day. This was around maybe 6 o'clock, 6:15, close to the 6:30 hour. It shows individuals being arrested. If we have that video, let's take it. We want to show, I saw 2 individuals getting arrested. This video shows the young lady being carried by her hands and feet, wrapped in a flag, as police took her and then put her in the transport vehicle. As you heard, our photojournalist Sam Vega, he also mentioned that he saw police detain several people. Why they were detained, to be determined. But I can tell you this much, when we come back live, when this group came down State Street on North, here on State Street, and they tagged these vehicles, not a single person was detained because we were standing here and that group continued on. So there's a good chance that CPD witnessed what happened, and that goes to show the de-escalation that they're dealing with. Even though they're seeing individuals, it may have not been advantageous for them to pull someone when they're surrounded and outnumbered in a crowd. So yes, it's not good to see any police squad defaced in this manner, but keep in mind, they deal with de-escalation training, and maybe being the aggressor in a crowd like that would not have been advantageous for any of the officers.
Yeah.
At this hour, we do not know of any serious injuries and/or major arrests related to all of the demonstrations that have been taking place here in the Loop. And we're going to monitor the situation as we have been doing here on CBS News Chicago.com and on air in the stream. Joe and Marie.
That may be changing, Jermont, because we're looking at Sabrina Franza's location right now, and it appears that police have moved in. This is on Wacker. You can see the building behind there, 55W is for Wacker. It appears that they're trying to address this crowd, or at least keep them maybe from going north, any more of them, as we've seen a large number of people have already made it across the river on Dearborn. And I'm not sure exactly, this may be at Dearborn as well.
I believe it is, Joe, yes.
Yeah, so it looks like they've stopped people from crossing the river and keeping them in the Loop instead of allowing them to move into River North.
We know some at least have moved into River North. It does seem like that splintering happened. As we listen in here, we're hearing chants. You see police there prepared in their gear to deal with a crowd that, again, has been mostly peaceful outside of tagging some vehicles. And I'm curious to listen in, if we can, any of this conversation. You see some officers on the move there.
Let's check in with Sabrina. Sabrina, what exactly happened before we came to your shot there?
Hey, Joe, Marie. So we're standing, as you mentioned, we're at the corner now of Dearborn and Wacker, and as the crowd was trying to make their way across the street, there was some sort of argument between a demonstrator and the police. There was a struggle that ensued, and it appears as if that person might have been taken into custody, or some de-escalation has happened since. Now, if we take a look here, if we can just turn around, Alfredo, really quick, this line now has been formed further down the bridge, a secondary line to keep people from crossing the bridge further than they already have. Now we're standing pretty much in the middle of the 2 lines of police on either side of this bridge here on Dearborn. Police trying, as we mentioned, to make sure that no more protesters make their way into River North than have already done so, that you saw in our last hit when you came to us a few moments ago. So this area now clear on the bridge of demonstrators, with the exception of some people on either side of the pedestrian walkway, but the roadway itself is now cleared as Chicago police work to secure this area that was previously overwhelmed by demonstrators making their way from the Loop towards River North. We do not know where this crowd is headed. It is unclear where the folks that made their way into River North are going. And we also saw, as we mentioned earlier, another group that has peeled off and made their way back towards Michigan in the Loop itself. We have seen folks from the mayor's team on staff trying to make sure that police are doing their job correctly. We have seen folks, high-ranking police officers within the Chicago Police Department, trying to make sure that the people's First Amendment rights to protest are protected. And so many of those officers have made their way here, it seems, to this portion of the border of River North and downtown to mitigate these crowds in some way. Of course, as soon as you leave the loop, it becomes an even more serious traffic concern for those who are trying to make their way out of the loop and head home. This bridge is now closed, as well as obviously the State Street Bridge is closed for construction. So this is going to become a traffic nightmare as police try to get this under control. Joe Marie.
Yeah, it's already a traffic nightmare in the loop. We're watching several police squad cars going by our street side studio here at Dearborn and Washington. It's unclear where they're heading, but it appears we're hearing now that this large group that had made it into River North has now turned off of Dearborn and has at least tried now to circle back, maybe to head south back into the loop. But this is one section of a large group of protesters we've been telling you about this afternoon. Some of them are still being held behind the river, south on Dearborn. The police are lined up now, not allowing them to cross. So this group that did get across the river and into River North is now apparently heading back around and south into the loop again.
It's thousands of people. It's possible, we don't know this for sure, but there may have been strategy in trying to separate a little bit of that group, to have the people that were in River North sort of cut off there at the bridge at Dearborn, as we see a more face-to-face interaction where Sabrina is, where we're seeing police and these demonstrators sort of figure out what's next. We thought it was possible that this would return to where it started, which was Federal Plaza, just about 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
Not clear that that is what's happening now.
Clark and Ontario is where they are. So if they're heading south, they're on Clark, heading back toward the loop. Something came to me as we've been listening to Jermont and Sabrina talk about the police tactics here, and it sends me back to the DNC last summer, when I think police were expecting somewhere upwards of 20 to 25,000 protesters, remember, at Union Park. Now that didn't materialize, but police were certainly praised for their handling of that, and it appears, at least part of what I remember from that, Sabrina, is when it happened, they allowed people to do what you're seeing them to do right now. But if there were agitators, they pulled them out of the crowd, they arrested them, they removed them from the situation, and it looks like that's what they're doing here tonight as well.
We saw that in Jermont's video. He was able to capture a woman being taken into custody, or again using de-escalation tactics, just being able to sort of pluck her out and isolate her as opposed to fanning some flames within the bigger crowd. And you see, I'm trying to look in Sabrina's picture right now. It does seem like maybe some of those demonstrators are the ones who are a little bit more on the move, although I see some gathered there. It just does appear like that crowd of what looked to be a pretty good mix of officers and demonstrators is not as large at that intersection as it was even just a few minutes ago.
Here's another subtle, I guess, sign of how Chicago police handles these. And you've noticed it in Los Angeles. The police there, in many cases, are wearing riot gear. They're wearing helmets. In this situation, most of what you see with CPD on these demonstrations, they're on bicycles. They're not all geared up, which some might argue. Again, I don't know how people look at these, psychologically from a standpoint of people who are already sort of worked up and protesting to run into people who they think might be looking for a fight. Is it smarter to use these tactics rather than what we're seeing in LA? You can debate that, but I think it's maybe testament to why we haven't seen some of the confrontation that you see in other cities when police show up almost as if they're looking for a fight. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I think it's certainly intentional on the part of CPD.
We had many police experts during the DNC talk about those, the impact of those visuals, Joe, so I do think you're really onto something. We know that demonstrations similar to this have happened in other American cities today. There was protesting outside the immigration headquarters in New York, as well as outside of an immigration court in Seattle. Now we have Chicago, demonstrators outside of the federal building, Federal Plaza. Where they go next, if they stay here, trying to engage with police, making their voices heard to these officers, it's possible. You have to imagine that's what that man that you see standing on one of those concrete pylons or planters is doing. But for everyone else, they are, as you see here, still on the move on the right side of your screen. We believe it's possible. Joe, is this the group? Okay, Hotel Felix, that was in River North.
Right, that's the group on the right on Skywatch. That's the group heading back south, I believe. And it's unclear where that other group and where they went from Dearborn right there. But it looks like traffic is now getting through. So where that back half of the group of protesters went is unclear at this point. But this goes back to what Sabrina was saying just a minute ago, is that this No Kings protest that is set up for Saturday.
Yes.
I know one of the main locations is Daley Plaza. It's unclear how many will be gathering there, but I'm assuming will be as large as this group has been tonight. But there are a number of others that are around in the suburbs, different areas, north and south of Chicago. And then, as Sabrina mentioned, 1,800 of these protests set up nationwide on Saturday. And to your point, your question to Jermont, what are they protesting?
Right.
Several things. You heard someone walk by Jermont at the end there and say "Free Palestine." So you can imagine that. But these No Kings were really aimed at what they consider to be President Trump's authoritarian rule here in his second term. So it's to coincide with this military parade he set up for Saturday that coincides with his birthday. And it also, don't forget, here in Chicago on Saturday, we have the big celebration of Pope Leo XIV at the Rate at Sox Park. So there's going to be a lot going on Saturday.
Keep that in mind if you're a Chicagoan, if you're coming into the city or out, you're just staying aware of the happenings, and be sure to stick with us as we cover all of those events. Let's go back now to our Sabrina Franza. She is right there at Wacker and Dearborn. She's the shot where you see there on the left side of your screen, where we are looking at these officers watching some traffic go by. Sabrina, could you see which way the group, as of what's left of it from that location, was moving?
Hey, Marie. So yes, as you mentioned, we're on Dearborn and Wacker now, and this bridge making into River North is totally shut down. This is the last line of police before cars or pedestrians can use this roadway and make their way into River North. And that was done in part to separate some of the protesters that made their way across the bridge from the rest of the group, which it appears from where we were standing that they made their way towards the lake, back towards Michigan, towards Grant Park, where we were earlier, where that large group, as it was in its entirety, gathered for a few brief moments before they decided to make a loop around and then continue headed in this direction. This part of the bridge continues to be closed, but as you can see, it does appear like traffic is moving much more freely on the other side of this line of police officers. Cars are having a much easier time getting where they need to go, at least it seems from where we're standing, so long as they are not trying to make their way across the bridge here into River North. And I want to give you just a visual of what this empty roadway looks like here. On the other side, you have somebody waving a Mexican flag in solidarity with seemingly folks who have immigrated to the United States from Mexico. Of course, Chicago has a large population of Mexican immigrants, and the culture of the Mexican community is so pervasive here in our city. It is a total sign of the time. If you wanted to take just a snapshot of today and have that be the cover photo, it almost rings true to what these protesters have been saying all day, which is that they are against the immigration enforcement actions by the Trump administration, specifically to new arrivals, immigrants, people who have been here for 20 years and have been showing up to do what they needed to do to court, to getting to their appointments, and then faced some sort of detention action, some sort of immigration action, or just are dealing with the fear of being deported, living here in Chicago, a sanctuary city, a city that has been welcoming and has been made up of immigrants. So this person, this lone protester now, it seems, on the other side of the bridge, really holding the line opposite of the Chicago police that are standing on the opposite side of this bridge into River North. Somebody that made their way seemingly around the loop and was one of the only people still standing on the other side of this bridge, really telling the story of this afternoon just by simply standing there and waving a flag. Marie Jo.
It's quite a picture. Sabrina, thank you. We're starting to see some of the landmarks, although it looks like they've made a turn now.
Yes.
They were at the Rock and Roll McDonald's right there at Ontario and Clark.
It looked like, yeah, they were headed south on Clark, but now I'm trying to use these landmarks to figure out their next move. And again, this is just one. I believe, let's see, I think they are turning on Grand briefly.
Oh, there's another part of the group there.
Okay. Our crews are trying to keep tabs on the various factions of this larger group of demonstrators that have broken off in some points, but it looks like they're possibly coming back together. Let's see, right there on Clark.
Yeah, see, now you can see the police vehicles there. They're definitely trying to herd this group into a certain direction now. So again, you know, as especially CPD prepares for the No Kings protests on Saturday, there was a game plan going into this today, and they've become quite used to handling these crowds. But as we said, this one really got quite large and almost unmanageable, if you will. So at that point, you really almost just sort of have to maybe pick a spot to try to cut them off and force them in a certain direction. Because as we said, there were officers who were walking at the front, and as we saw with Jermont, at the back of this group too in several locations. And it's another thing that I guess, you know, when you're in these protests, maybe folks don't think about, but it does become sort of an us against them, and you see people tagging police vehicles when, in essence, part of the rub here in Chicago between President Trump and the city is that he doesn't like the fact that we are a sanctuary city. So in many instances, folks who are upset with CPD might be looking in the wrong direction.
And it is part of CPD's job to protect these demonstrators.
Sure.
It is part of what happens in America, that they are also looking out for the safety of those people. It's why those streets are blocked off. It's why CPD is at the head, and why 2 hours ago, when much of this march started, we saw officers really lining the sides of this, protecting people involved. But at this point, it has just become so spread out. I have to think, Joe, that it's likely with this group headed back south, it is possible that they could regroup back at Federal Plaza.
Right. That's probably a good guess. Or Daley Plaza.
Or Daley Plaza. I think that might be a central gathering space for everyone to come back together. And we will continue to watch and see if that happens.
We will. Okay, we're going to step aside here for just a minute, but we will certainly keep an eye on what's happening downtown as these protesters continue to march through River North and also the Loop. On what's been a very busy afternoon.
We will also continue to work our sources and gather information on that vehicle that we saw come dangerously close to people during the protest tonight to further confirm that there have been no injuries after that red vehicle that we last saw speeding through the south side was coming through the crowd and not hurting any of these demonstrators when that happened back at State and Monroe.
Well, we're fortunate no one was hurt. As that witness said, you know, it's really, it's lucky that no one was hurt or killed in that situation. But we will certainly keep an eye on the situation downtown. If something happens that we need to pass along, we will jump back on the stream here, or we'll cut into CBS News Chicago, and we will absolutely have the latest coming up tonight on our news at 10.